Our panel today is going to discuss migration from wherever to SQL Server and discuss some of the issues that you might encounter after the migration and also during the migration, the differences between your starting platform and your ending platform on SQL Server. To my right is Armin Stein, Luke Chung, Stephen Forte, and Richard Campbell, all of whom have extensive experience in SQL Server and for migrating from various platforms. So I'll lead off with Armin. And Armin, what are some of the things that you've encountered, some of the that SQL Server customers might find after a migration or during a migration, problems that they might not have anticipated that they would run into?
Well, I mean, migration, I think we all know migration is kind of a thankless task. If you do it absolutely perfectly, nobody notices.
That's right.
So, you know, it's one of those things where, and a lot of times our customers don't understand how complex it is. And they just go, well, can't you just port my data over and it's going to be fine?
Can't you just run a wizard?
Yeah, I just want to click a few buttons, run a wizard. Can't you just pour the data into a new bucket? And it's a lot more complex than that, as we all know. And I think it's really important to kind of have a strategy, you know, just to say what's the plan and how are we going to execute that plan. I'd be curious to know what everyone thinks.
I totally agree. I just think that most people look at migration as that sort of painful, I repeatedly move the data over and I keep trying to code the new app to make it work. We did a session a few years ago.
TechEd 2004, migrating the data last.
And the big thing was taking advantage of SQL Server's ability through OLADB. We were able to, it was actually an Oracle database we were connecting through to.
An Oracle database running on Linux.
Under Linux, running, connecting remotely. The whole point was, and I'd done this in the field, to build the new app, right, which was largely a port of the old app, but leave the old app running the whole time because the data stayed in place in the original environment the entire time until the new app naturally supplanted it.
So you basically tackled the problem as though you were creating an application from scratch.
Basically, yeah.
To leverage the capabilities of SQL Server while still running the old one.
And so we were living in stored procedures inside of SQL Server entirely, but those stored procedures were calling to the other data store.
Using Enterprise Link Server.
Yeah, and we had some performance challenges, but the upside of that was I never made anybody move switch apps. What we did was started only adding features to the new app that ran through SQL Server until gradually there was nobody using the old app anymore. And then we took it away and then migrated the data.
So it was totally transparent to the end users. They really didn't have any idea what was going on behind the scenes.
Well, they knew there was two programs. And so every so often we'd have bugs in the new program, which was, you know, life, but they were always able to go to the old program. But what we were getting away from was that terrible whammy of I migrate the data, I build a new app, people start putting data into the new app on the new database, and it breaks, and then you need to revert. And now do I have to,
migration in reverse.
Yeah, do I have to push the data you just added into the new system back to the old system? It's terrible. And
so you basically were describing a very long parallel test.
Absolutely a long parallel.
Yeah.
And the advantage of it was, by migrating the data very last, is we never lost anything. We didn't create any pain for the customer, right? And the customer eventually, they wanted a new, we called them lollipops, deliberately creating new features in the new app that made them want to move.
Yeah, draw them over.
And the developer liked it as well because they were calling SQL Server stored procedures. Those SQL Server stored procedures, of course, were calling Oracle pSQL using the Enterprise Link servers. But when we finally did migrate the data to SQL Server and we rewrote those stored procedures in T-SQL against SQL Server data, not a single line of code of ASP.NET and ADO.NET had to be changed.
Yeah, at that point it was completely transparent to them. And everything, all they noticed was everything went faster. When we actually got rid of that link, suddenly, and the fact that they'd lived for over a year with that slow connection, and it was tolerable. So then one day, good things happened.
One day we did performance tuning.
We passed the fast button.
I mean, I think part of this depends very much on the application itself, how large it is, what level of effort's required for it. I mean, a one-year type of solution is very different from, say, a smaller application that's just on the brink of needing to be migrated to a platform like SQL Server. So,
well, I guess the question is why migrate? Like, what possibly stimulates you to want to move from one platform to the other? And you know, access is one thing in the sense that you get to a point in access where a number of users, size of data, that database, and I don't want to pick on access per se, there's lots of databases that hit a wall, and then you want to move to a larger class of database, something that's
like
designed.
MySQL.
Okay. And then,
If you want to pick on somebody.
what have we got to do to get there?
Right.
Right.
I mean, we see the biggest drivers for migration really is not the number of users or the size of the data, but more issues with regards to security, robustness,
Reliability.
the ability to do transaction logs, some of the auditing capabilities and things like that that a platform like SQL Server or Oracle offer, really changing from a file server environment to a
Right.
SQL Server environment. and
Yeah,
giving
there's
those
so many
features.
reasons. I mean, performance is just the beginning, hitting the wall, but yeah, hitting the wall on security, hitting the wall on so many things.
I mean, we often find performance is not the reason, because oftentimes the data that people are dealing with is relatively small.
Right.
I mean, it can all fit in RAM. Usually it's under a few gig. So it's these other reasons that are critical for a business that require the migration.
I tend to see reliability as one of the main reasons.
Yeah.
When I was a consultant, I would always ask, when they're in a file server database, I would say things like, will this cause harm to your business if you lose half a days of transactions?
Right.
Because the file
Yeah.
server
How long
went-
can you be without this?
Yeah, downtime as well as data loss. I mean, two
Right.
different metrics that
Right.
really help us justify the cost of moving to a larger system and cut. They are the worst projects. The migration projects, absolutely the worst projects.
Takes a special person actually to track it all the way through.
Because you're taking an app that worked just fine, has some issue, and creating new issues in it.
Obviously, nobody's going to want to migrate a failed app. That's
Yeah.
like a pure rewrite from the ground up. What happens when a customer comes to you and they basically don't have any money? Like, what are their options? Is there a way to sort of migrate on the cheap? What are some of the techniques that you would use to help people that need to achieve those business goals, but they have no budget, no money?
Well, if they have no
whatever?
budget, they call these other guys. I'm out. I'm out at that point.
Forget Armin.
But if you're going to SQL Server, you're spending significant coin on some licenses here, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's got to be some money to play with. But
So where do you cut corners on the application? I mean, where do you all right, you have to move your